Welcome to the Rock Guitar Confidential Podcast with Ryan and Scott. Today's episode, an interview with Edge of Paradise guitarist Dave Bates. He and I go back a long way. We'll talk about it right after this.
I'm going to hit record over here.
So I think that having R2D2's many drug habits, like being exposed to the world, is going to really destroy people's lives, I think, at the end of the day.
It's, well, true. Well, then there's going to be... it's not behind the music, but one of those documentaries.
It would be behind the music, right? That'd be like
behind the android.
Behind the android and his addiction. He's out there like selling his body on the streets. You know what I mean?
Right.
He's got all those attachments. I'm sure like the weirdos would be way into that.
He fell in with some bad trash cans.
Exactly. And they made him like make some bad choices.
Yeah, he did some stuff that he never thought he'd have to do to survive.
3PO and BB-8 had to have like an intervention for him and stuff. And it's like, what is this? A bunch of perfect people all judging me? I've seen you snorting all that Tuscan blow in C-3PO. You're gonna judge me. Yeah.
No, the problem is that he thinks he's better when he's slamming that motor oil.
Exactly. 3PO's all gacked up, running around in circles.
Right. So it would be droid intervention. It would be an episode of droid intervention.
That'd be awesome. It's like Dr. Drew could get involved. That should actually that should be a thing. That should actually really happen. Lucasfilm, I hope that they're listening to this because that's the. I mean, we talked about how to other things we could do to save Star Wars, but I mean that's another thing that would be. I
think that would be great. Well, can you imagine? Can you imagine the intervention and everybody has to, like when Chewbacca has to read his letter?
He's like,
Brrr. Yeah, right.
How could you say that to me, man? I thought we were friends. Chewbacca's like,
right.
Yeah, you go straight to hell, man.
You know what would be if
we're through, you and me. You know,
if Chewbacca just got pissed and like ripped his arms off.
Yep.
He's a
ripped off R2D2's arms. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, I can see that.
That'd be cool.
Something we all kind of get behind.
They'd resurrect him later to sell more toys. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's an obvious thing. I mean, that's what you should do. That's just good business.
if R2 turned into the Towley of the Star Wars universe, that would be hilarious.
That would be
I'm all for that.
I think so too. So, any other Star Wars hate you want to get off your chest before we start the interview?
No, dude. My disappointment is just kind of steady right now.
Now, why is it more so now? I don't remember you talking this much about it before.
It's just steady. Well, it comes up somehow. I mean, I've got friends who are into Star Wars. So.
Yeah, you do. And one sitting right here.
Oh, now, you know what? To stay positive, Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon will be debuting on Netflix in December 2023.
I actually have not heard of that. What is that?
Okay, so Zack Snyder.
Yeah, I know, the director of 300 and Justice League and all that stuff, right?
Yep. So I guess 10 or 15 years ago, I mean, maybe more, he had a plot for an upcoming like standalone Star Wars film called Rebel Moon. It's basically like a Seven Samurai thing, like assemble all these,
disparate warriors.
Yeah, disparate warriors to do battle against the evil empire and the whole 9 yards. Well, anyway, Lucasfilm didn't pick it up because they suck. And of course, Disney's definitely not going to pick it up because they super suck. Oh, I've got even more reason.
Wait, is this before Lucas sold the
Yeah, well before that. Okay. Well before that. And I've got more reasons to despise Disney today.
Oh, okay.
But that's a separate thing, so we'll put that on the parking lot for now.
So that's going to be something we'll come back to, and we'll discover more and more reasons.
Oh, dude, you have no idea.
I gotta have some idea. I'm sure.
What I know about Disney now feels personal.
Oh, jeez.
It does. It feels personal, and you'll understand why immediately.
They murdered my dad and raped my wife.
Well, it's just about that bad.
Come on.
So back to Rebel Moon, so people have some sci-fi to look forward to.
Dave.
Oh, hey.
All right.
Well, it's being released. It'll be like an adult Star Wars plot.
Fair enough. Yeah, okay, guys, so this is the Rock Guitar Confidential Podcast with Ryan, Scott, and today with our guest, Dave Bates. We're going to talk about Dave's awesome band, Edge of Paradise, and his history as a guitar player, our shared history as musicians, and so on. And this is just for the record, this is our second swipe at this because we didn't record the first part of it. So thank you for your patience, Dave. Appreciate that, man.
All good.
Right, so let's start off with your history as a guitar player. You started off, what made you inspired to pick up the guitar first?
Well, probably like we just briefly spoke about, like hearing Kiss when I was a little kid, and my mom was into like rock music, but of course, mom's music is like Beatles and stuff that I didn't really get
or something like that.
Yeah, my mom was into Neil Sedaka and Barbra Streisand. So
there you go.
did okay, man. Yeah,
dude, my mom and dad were into Glenn Campbell and the Bee Gees.
Yeah.
Glenn Campbell was a great player.
I remember
Yeah,
the
but it was
Bee
like,
Gees. My mom was into all that stuff too, and
Yeah.
it's just like when I found the first Kiss album, like that was super cool to me because they looked like they were from outer space. So, when you're a kid and you're watching cartoons, and then you see this band that looks like a cartoon, but the sound, the landscape of the music was so aggressive and loud. And then, of course,
Yeah, it's good music. Yeah.
somebody showed me Van Halen 1, and that just blew my mind. Like, I couldn't comprehend. I could totally see how Ace Frehley and Kiss, maybe they were playing instruments, maybe they were from outer space, maybe not, but you could easily identify, that they were actually playing, that this could be played. But once I heard Van Halen 1, I was like, how is that even possible? Like,
That's the same reaction everybody had to Van Halen.
Right.
That's right. It was kind of like, how is that even possible? And what's funny, and we've talked about this before, and just to sidetrack on that for a second, I think one of the reasons a lot of what I call old timers don't dig the 80s metal is that I feel like Van Halen was like the first shot that made them feel kind of irrelevant, if that makes sense. Like that was before that was like Clapton, Page, Beck, Hendrix, Pete Townsend, even Ace Frehley's from that same school. But like Van Halen was something totally different. And I think that when that came out, there's a lot of hate from that generation towards the music of the 80s. And I think that's a big part of why, because they kind of felt like they were left in the dust when that happened. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah,
well,
I guess.
I don't know if. Yeah, good.
No, go ahead.
I don't know if I don't know if the music industry in terms of like the retail portion factors into this, but like how often do you guys see ads for guitar is easy?
Yeah,
right? I think there's like a common perception that I'm going to play guitar, that's easy, and Eddie Van Halen just totally flipped that on its head.
Yeah, but do you agree with that though? Those old school players kind of felt a little bit like intimidated by the new guys.
For sure, they would have been threatened.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's still intimidating. Like, if you listen to the beginning of Mean Streets, it's like, how did he come up with such a cool thing? You know what I mean? And it's totally foreign to anything else that preceded it. I mean, maybe to him it wasn't.
Really, the closest I can think of is some of the stuff Tosin Abasi's doing nowadays with some of the slap bass techniques he's using on the guitar. That's like the closest I can think of, but it's not nearly as cool as what Van Halen did. Not at all. It's saying that
it doesn't have the same attitude that Eddie had.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
Right, and that's the thing now with everybody using those dampening devices. It's like, Eddie was using one humbucker, one volume knob, and when I got my first real guitar, I went out and I got a Beretta. Right, I had the one humbucker.
Nice.
And it was brutal. It's like you had to control everything yourself with your hands and your fingers, and that's just the raw element of like taming the guitar, cranking it up, going for it, and taming it. Nowadays everybody's like
old Plexi. You didn't have a master volume amp, dude.
I like the Wizard because it's got that raw vibe, but it's like halfway through those shows, everybody's like, "Hey, can you make it sound a little bit more like the Kemper and get it more in the background?" I'm like, "No,
it's got a little bit too big open sound." Yeah, that's so
like
funny.
the brutal, like in your face element of like, because if you make a mistake with something like that, it's all on you, man. But when you play it correctly, and when you're warmed up and you're in the zone and everything's feeling good, you can hear it. Those kind of amps and that setup is just like cuts right through the mix. People can feel it. You can feel it when you're playing it. So
you got to play with conviction.
Yeah.
That's the key to that.
It makes your pant legs flap.
Yep, exactly. That's something that only people like around our age are going to actually ever think about or know. Nobody who's under like 20 uses freaking amps. You know what I mean? Or if they do, it's a 20-watt bedroom amp kind of thing. You know what I mean?
It's tough. It took me decades to finally get into amp sims, and that was just for our most recent recording project.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So after you discovered Eddie, what was the next big thing that kind of pushed you down the path of playing more intense guitar?
Yeah, then it was jumping to Randy Rhoads, because that's what I identified with on the East Coast. It was dark. We'd spend the winters in the basement playing guitar,
which again sounds great. I'm all for that.
For me, that was like this thing that I found that I enjoyed, because I grew up and everybody's into sports, and I like sports, but to me it really wasn't. It was just something that was fun to goof around with. But like once I found guitar, I'm like, this is something that I could play it for hours and hours and not get bored. And I could see that there was a huge, there's this huge wealth of knowledge that you can pursue for years. You could, and then where's the end? Like you're going to be looking for new sounds. You're going to be trying to go past where the others have come from, and like there's just no end to it. So it's something that I found, and then I got to Randy Rhoads and I mimicked everything he did. And I started to play in cover bands, and I started to realize that minor sixth, the natural minor scale, wasn't going to work in the blues-based stuff. Yeah, playing Rock and Roll by Zeppelin and trying to play Randy Rhoads solo in there, you keep clashing with the major sixth and the riff. And, it took a while, because Connecticut, most of the people are really thick-headed, and, they don't want to, they don't know theory. Well, there's two people in Connecticut, right? You got Ivy League people, they go to Berkeley, right? And they just have a huge chip on their shoulder. And they're not like the blue collar player guy. They're not going to sit there and practice. They're more like, I know everything, they just have the chip on their shoulder. So most of the people I grew up with and knocking around in cover bands and playing in bars, they were anti-theory. So it took me a while
I'm
to
just
figure
a
out,
feel guy.
Yeah,
well, finding somebody to teach you in that scenario is very challenging, because you want to find somebody who's a rock dude who knows stuff. It's really hard. That's the thing that I found for myself when I was learning too, is I couldn't find a rock guy who knew anything. I could find jazz guys and classical guys who knew all the theory, but they hated rock, or I could find a rock guy who didn't know anything. So, or I think I've told the story to the podcast before, but I found a guy who knew stuff but couldn't teach.
That's a tough one too.
Yeah.
I mean, I always think about that before I went to music school. If I had me as a teacher, like for 5 years before music school, I would have come in and been so much more prepared, man.
I'm still working on the time machine downstairs, man. It's going to take me like another couple years.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, you yourself taught for years, right?
Yeah, well, just like you. I mean, we went to MI, and that's the whole reason I went to MI too, because growing up in Connecticut, I decided at some point, I played in cover bands forever, and I kept thinking, like, how can other guitar players make a living from music? What is it that they do that I'm not doing? Or what is it that the people in Connecticut think that you can't do? Because the mindset there is, that's a hobby. You need to get a job.
That's not
real blue collar.
That's a mindset in a certain part of culture, man. I'm telling you, it's not just in Connecticut.
It is, man. It's the mindset of people who don't understand pursuing a passion with with everything you have, right? Like going full into something because that's the thing that brings you the most joy. But the thing for me was playing in cover bands, and I can remember being 19, 20 years old, and we would make, $700-800 on the weekend. Back then, you would work all week at a regular job, and you'd be lucky to take home $250-300. So
that's true.
I was thinking to myself at the time, like, wait, I'm just spending all the money that I make on the weekend because that's hobby money, right? And so, but it's a lot more than I work all week to make. But my mom and my dad, they're telling me I need to grow up, right? I need to get a real job. And I'm thinking, like, wait, how come a real job pays much less than, working a few hours playing in a bar, right? I would rather be in a bar, having a few drinks, enjoying the time.
Awesome stuff.
Playing something, doing something I enjoy doing. So that's what led me to go to MI. And that the other thing of people not knowing theory on the East Coast and being rockers, they were either jazz guys like you encountered, which totally frowned upon the rock thing. And of course, the pursuit of jazz is, accepting that you're going to do it wholeheartedly for the love of music and reside to making, low or no money. So I didn't want to settle
terrible music
one or the
too,
other.
I should probably point that out. Making horrible music that no one should have to listen to.
It's more self-indulgent, right?
You'd probably have access to a lot of really delicious Italian food.
Yes,
like
you're playing at the
bistros
restaurant.
and stuff.
Weddings too.
Yep.
That kind
if you're fired up about veal, hey, there you go. It's a benefit.
It's funny. I'll just share this, Dave. I really haven't talked a ton since we went to school together, but my experience at MI. I mean, honestly, thank God for you and for Chris and for George, because like you guys were the people who got me through. Because my roommates in music school were these super jazz guys, and all teachers there were really into jazz. And I went through this whole process of like 2 or 3 years after school where I like heavily got into jazz. I studied it, went and got a real book. I formed a jazz trio. I was trying to like get my jazz chops together. And then eventually I kind of gave myself permission to decide that, I just hate jazz. That's the problem. It's not that I'm missing anything. I just fucking hate this shit. I want to play the Scorpions and Van Halen. You know what I mean? And I had to give myself permission for that. But at music school, you kind of like, if you said, hey, I want to play like Van Halen or Randy Rhoads, they kind of look at you like, well, no, you should be getting into Joe Pass and, Charlie Christian. That's what real music is. You know what I mean? And that it really, I wouldn't say traumatized me, but it pissed me the fuck off. I gotta tell you, when I was in school, I'm glad I did it because I grew as a musician incredibly. But I don't know. What was your experience? I'm kind of curious because we went through that together. Like,
well, I mean, yeah. Of course, like for me, because you guys were cool, like you find your core people, right? And we, like, I think at the end of studying anything, you have to keep the passion, right? You have to keep the energy in your playing. And so whatever kind of music it is, if you don't wholeheartedly love it, right, and you pursue it, it's really going to end up milking the vibe and the feel out of it. And so the whole thing with music is it's something that you have to be able to take the feelings, right? You have to put blood, sweat, energy. You have to be able to try to pull that out, show it to somebody on stage. And that's the beautiful thing. I mean, if you look at Angus Young or any of these guys, they do the same thing over and over, but they never lose the energy. And it's
because it's totally authentic.
It's nuts.
Yeah,
it's
like they make you believe it.
Yeah. I mean, and they're just plugged in, man. That at that point, like, and I think about this a lot when we're working on music and recording music. Like, we're just an instrument too, right? We're plugging in, we're picking up our hammer or our axe, and we're trying to, pull something from it, right? But what we're trying to pull from it is something that exists inside of you already. And it's like you're trying to use those notes to convey it. And the hardest thing is bringing all that together, right? And you almost need to become one with that instrument. You need to become like a computer or it's not you, it's not for your own self-interest entirely, but it's really hard to do what the greats do. They can, like Angus, 50, 60 years of playing the same chords and same riffs over and over, and he can still bring life to it, which is
but it's still
amazing.
Authentic to who he is, man. That's just him,
right?
Who he is. It's funny in a much more complex way. Steve Vai's like that. Steve Vai, when I hear him play, I can hear him be totally plugged in what he's trying to do.
Yep.
He's so authentic. It's just a very obscure, kind of strange, complex authenticity, but it's there. What are you gonna say, Ryan?
Well, no, it's all about finding your voice.
I agree.
Right? Yeah. I tell all my students, look, I'm always going to sound like you, like me, and you're always going to sound like you.
Yep.
Right? We're just working towards helping you like how that sounds.
Yeah.
Right?
Becoming. What did Judith say? Something like learning a shitty voice. Yeah. Go ahead, sorry, Dave. Go ahead.
Yep.
That's your best case scenario, because I started out imitating people. So I imitated Randy Rhoads. I imitated Yngwie Malmsteen, and I did it.
Yes.
Just like we know the Japanese guys that we went to MI with, they can imitate anything. Like within a year, they're like flawlessly that person, but they can't deviate. And then, I went down that whole thing where then I had to become Eddie Van Halen. I had to be able to, then I thought, well, let me try to do everything. Let me be the everything guy. So I spent all that time searching for my own voice, right? Because when I played my own shit, it just felt harder. It felt much more difficult. What do I do? How do I write a song? How do I pull from the same 4 chords or 5 chords? How do I use the same notes and make it sound authentically unique and like true to myself? And that's a daunting task. That's like a huge monumental thing.
You had your voice back then. I remember we jammed a lot back in those days, and you definitely, I could tell the difference when you were playing. I mean, you were definitely a dude who was plugged in. Even then, I could tell that you were going that direction. You know what I mean? So you were definitely.
Oh, thanks, man. I mean, it might have been arrogance.
No, it wasn't. Because what's funny? Like you and I are like one of the 2 guys who actually really put our laid it out there. We really fucking played. All of our friends who played were much more reserved. You know what I mean? They didn't just like throw down. You know what I mean? And I think that when you and I would jam, we're just freaking laying it out, man. Here you go. You know what I mean? And I feel like other friends of ours who were great players, but they were more kind of reserved, pulled back. And you had that then. I think you were really in the middle of your Yngwie phase when I first met you, because you had a lot of that.
It's a good phase.
Yeah, I liked.
It's a great phase.
I like the Yngwie. And I like John Sykes a lot. Like I like the stuff he did with Thin Lizzy and those big picking runs that were just like blazing. He didn't switch to the neck pickup. He just gunned it out however it fell out of there. And sometimes it's the coolest, rawest thing.
And you mentioned John Sykes, and we're talking about all having our own voice. I think vibrato, I think about the way we all are different in the way we attack notes and when, how we decide to do that in the moment. I mean, John Sykes is one of those, You know, like he was popularizing pinch harmonics and wide vibrato before Zakk Wylde came around.
Well, like 10
Just
years
his whole attitude and feel. It's, you know,
fiery. I would say the thing about Sykes
Totally.
that strikes me, he's got this fire, this like attitude and this attack. You know what I mean? And
he wants to spray the crowd with a flamethrower, and I respect that.
Yeah, exactly, in a good way. And like, if you listen to the '87 record, like if you listen to the riff to "Still of the Night" and stuff, that's just badass shit.
Yeah,
Which not everybody knows how to play correctly.
That's true. But I mean, I listened to like some death metal. You know, they're cool and they're heavy and stuff, but I think it's got so much less attitude than
it does.
Than what you know what Sykes was doing. You know what I mean?
Well,
unless it's Individual Thought Patterns by Death with Andy LaRocque.
Dude, Individual Thought Patterns by Death is different. We're talking Chuck Schuldiner. You know what I mean? That
You
guy
said
was a
death
monster.
metal, man. I'm going to go to the source.
Well, I'm thinking like newer death metal bands.
Ah,
You know what I
okay.
mean?
Sorry.
Bands that aren't as good. That's what I'm trying to say.
You mean like
All right,
every
speaking of
like,
bands, let's
like every band on Liquid Metal? It's like they sound exactly the same. It's like you can't. Dude, and the funny thing is. The funny thing is, I was listening to that the other day, and it's like we were cruising around. We had to drive long distance, and the band's names are the funniest thing. Like one was 100 Demons, and then the next band was like 200 Bodies, and then it was like 1,000 Fist of Furies. It's like, geez, man, it's getting more.
Number name bands.
I thought you were going to say 101 Demons. Was the
I thought.
I was going to say I'd like to announce my my new band, 201 Bodies.
Exactly. 200.
Yes, they're on tour with Avenged Eightfold now, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
No, see, I think, okay, let's talk about bands. Your amazing band, Edge of Paradise, which I had the chance to see you live recently. That was awesome. You guys are great. Why don't you tell us about your band? How'd you guys form? Where are you guys at in your process
awesome
right
stuff,
now?
man.
The whole thing. Yeah,
well, thank you guys.
Checking it out all week.
Been listening all week, man. I've taken notes. I can't wait to talk to you about it.
Cool.
Love the band.
So let's talk about your band. How'd you guys get together? Where you guys, what's the process you're in right now, and where are you going next?
Well, I mean, starting kind of with a brief overview of how it started. Obviously, I was doing, and both you and I kind of had that thing where we wanted to do instrumentals, right? So
I actually did that about 5 instrumental records.
Yeah, you're still going for it, man. And I gotta hand it to you because that's something that's a tough road, man. But
yeah, it is.
That's a passion that, I mean, if you can pursue that and like, I mean, that's how this started. I started doing instrumentals, and I met Tony Franklin because a guy hired me to do these live workshops. It was a drum workshop, and he hired Tony Franklin, Blue Murder, right? The firm.
Yeah.
So
fantastic bass player.
I hit him up. We were doing this clinic, and I was just playing simple stuff. It was more about those guys, but I was getting paid. And I noticed Tony was a really cool guy, so I was like, hey, I'm going to record some instrumentals. I started getting hip to, recording at home because first when I got an MI, I started doing those DVDs for Doug Marks and Metal Method. And,
yeah, I remember.
So I went to his house and I saw, hey, he has a recording studio in his house. I'm like, well, shit, then I could do that too. So I started doing that. I hit up Tony. Tony came over. We started recording instrumentals, and I was like, here's some stuff, and he would play flawless, just cool stuff right off the cuff. Leave. I would have these tracks, and I started thinking, okay, I'm going to build an all-star instrumental band. So then I hit him up. I said, hey, who can I get for a drummer? And he's like, well, I know Greg Bissonette. I'm like, I'd like to have Greg Bissonette, right? So I was teaching. I'm paying these guys. They're coming to my studio. I'm recording my instrumentals. I had no real plan. I was kind of feeling it out, just seeing what I'd write. Like, I didn't want to write exactly what Steve Vai does or anybody else does.
Well,
recording solos, recording riffs. Yeah, going through the process.
Like scratch tracks that you gave those guys, you give them lead sheets. How'd you go about doing it?
Well, those guys,
like
Greg and Tony.
Kind of, or...
Yeah, usually I'd give them a demo and they wouldn't listen to it. They'd come over, write out the chart, and just go right through it. I mean, dude, Greg has played on, at the time, I mean, we're going back 10, 15 years now. At the time, he was telling me this is like my 314th CD he's recorded, like releasable album. Like, geez, man, that's insane. And Tony was maybe more than a third of that. He's like 100 and something in. So these guys are just, they just breathe and music comes out. And so
it's prolific. Yeah.
Right. And that's what we strive to be, right? That's what I always strive to be, just, about the music. Like, that's the thing that I identify with. So when I speak, it's got to be through music, and it's just trying to find that voice and searching for your voice. So we did that whole thing, and I started to think, hey, I found a bigger studio. I started recording the 2-inch because I heard Van Halen. Let me see if I can do 2-inch, and I'm doing 2-inch, and I'm playing through the whole stuff. I'm trying not to edit anything because these guys are hardcore. Greg can play the whole song, and very rarely do you need to edit anything. The feel, it's just beautiful.
Or something.
Right, yeah, maybe a different fill, but why bother? Because he's already got it,
Yeah.
So I hit up a friend of mine. Hey, I think I'm going to get a vocalist because, if I do this and I try to go license the album after I've spent, I'm starting to spend money now. I'm starting to get into it. I'm not, chances are I'm going to be losing money for a long period of time, if not forever. And since I have these named guys, and I'm thinking these named guys, maybe I can get bigger licensing fees. Let me get a vocalist. Let me see if I can do vocal tracks, which is something that I never focused on because I'm not a vocalist. I don't sing. I don't want to sing,
Yeah.
I guess if you held a gun to my head.
You have a soul. You're a good person. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I think we just had a similar experience.
Yeah. Actually, now take that back, Jude. If you're listening to this, you're awesome. Not all singers are bad. Just so you know.
We love you, Jude. You're awesome. Yeah, totally.
She's going to be listening to us. Actually, it really occurs to me right now that that's probably something I shouldn't have said.
Thanks for listening to Rock Guitar Confidential with Scott and Ryan and Dave. Please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Now back to the show.
Singers are a different breed, right? Like it's just one of those things where every singer I've ever worked with, and I try to explain that unless you know, you don't know, right? Everybody in the band has got their own unique niche. Bass players, same thing. They're kind of their own breed, and especially once they've been playing for a while, then you get it, right? You drummers got this thing that they are always, those characteristics are uniquely them. So I hit up my friend anyway. I said, hey, I'm looking for a singer. And he goes, well, I know Robin McCauley, but he's not singing right now. He doesn't want to sing anymore. And I'm thinking, well, Macaulay Schenker, like I remember him from MTV. Fuck, that would be great. And he's like, well, I need a drummer. So I'm like, well, I know Greg Bissonette. I'm sure he'd do your stuff. And it's a funny thing. So I hook up Greg with this guy's album. Next thing you know, and Greg, maybe he remembers it, maybe he don't. But then he's like, hey, Dave, you want to be my manager? And I'm like, fuck no, I don't want to be your manager.
Yes,
like, that's what I've always dreamed of. I started referring to people, right? I'm like, Greg's a great guy. He's the best. He's one of the best, Of course you got to use Greg.
Kind of common knowledge, man.
So that happens. He plays on this guy's album. I meet Robin McCauley. I start talking to him. We're writing. So we start taking my instrumental songs and making them vocal songs, which was a big process because at the time, and of course, Robin's back now. He's out. He's doing the Schenker thing again. He's been out for 15 years.
Yeah.
But at the time,
the Black Swan stuff he's done, dude, with Red Beach and Jeff Pilson.
I call him and he's like, I don't really sing anymore. And I'm like, wait, you're pulling my leg. You got to be pulling my leg, right? Because people know you. You're an amazing singer. People are going to want to hear I want to hear your voice, right?
Yeah.
So we talk. He comes over. He helps me write some stuff. We put a few songs together. Of course, now it's Tony Franklin, Greg Bissonette, Robin McCauley, and I'm the new guy, right? So it's kind of like the David Lee Roth All-Star. And I'm thinking, well, I could be Steve Vai in this. I made a couple Van Halen type songs. I made some harder edge songs, and at first I was having different singers until I got Robin too. So I had talked to Ralph from Steel Panther. That didn't work out. He was going through stuff when it was Danger Kitty, and I had another guy come in and sing like David Lee Roth on some tracks. So I have some tracks I'll send you. It's kind of funny.
Yeah,
I got one that's pretty much straight up Van Halen. That's pretty, but I thought would be cool.
Dude, Ralph can do that shit like nobody, man.
Yeah,
right?
Dude,
and on America's Got Talent now.
Yeah.
So let's hope Steel Panther goes all the way there.
Yeah. That's so
funny,
funny,
I mean. I wonder what. Yeah, that's a really unique turn of events, huh? Steel Panther being on American Idol or whatever. There, what?
Yeah,
isn't it?
It's cool, man.
And in terms of the people who watch that show probably aren't listening to rock. So
right
now they listen to some.
Never
You
seen
know?
guitar players do what Satchel's doing. Well, Russ.
Right.
Do you remember Russ?
Yeah.
He used to walk around that school all the time when we were there. He was there like every couple of weeks. He'd be wandering around. I remember seeing him in like the P100 building and stuff
Yep.
like that.
Yep.
You know, and now he's freaking Satchel.
Yeah. Well,
Cracks
Great
me up,
player.
man.
Great player.
So the studio
awesome.
I was
Yeah.
recording at, Russ used to come in there, and so that was another guy that kind of influenced me to keep going making my own music too, because he was coming in and doing demos before it was Danger Kitty, and they were doing Atomic Punks and stuff, and
Yep.
there's not that many guitar players down here, so it's inevitable.
No.
If you play around the same clubs, people are going to hit you up. I was doing tributes for a while, do you want to play, like, I had an audition for Atomic Punks. I went down, tried out for some other bands. And I just decided at one point, I'm not doing covers anymore, man. And I'm sure he did too.
Choose that.
I'm sure, however it worked out, because he left Atomic
Well, they did
Punks.
that shit forever, man.
Yeah, but
you guys did that
dude,
forever.
he had a deal. He was going to the same studio I was going to, and he was in a band called the Ducks. And he got like
I hadn't heard of those guys.
they gave him like $250,000 advance, and it never even got released. So now I'm
Wow.
thinking, man, my all-star band, this is going to be banging. I got to just go full into
Yeah.
this. So I kept pushing that, and we finally got an album together. We played some shows. We went out and we were doing the Macaulay Schenker stuff one night, and we would do Robin's old music with Michael Schenker, and we were doing UFO stuff and whatever, and then we would play the new songs, which was an earlier version of the band. I'm not even going to mention the name because it was a foolish name. And we had Bjorn England playing bass, my friend, another friend from MI. He plays with the Dio Disciples, and he played with Ingve.
Oh, cool.
So he's doing his stuff down here. So we played for a little while, and then Robin got the gig. Now Robin's out. He's singing again, right? So I think I convinced him. I definitely convinced him, because I called him. He told me he
Thank
wasn't
you.
going to sing anymore. Okay, so
If
whatever.
anyone reaches out to us, we'll let you know if there's any kind of pushback.
But he's
on
a
that,
great
you know what I
guy.
mean?
Like he's a super cool guy. You guys should hit him up and maybe get him on your thing, talk about Schenker. But he's a really good guy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That'd be great.
yeah, he's just like one of those guys that he's got great stories, man, and he'll talk your ear off. He loves telling you about the history of everything he's been involved in. And he's just a good dude all the way around. So
Nice. Well, especially
he gets the
talent
gig
like
in
that, it's always cool
Survivor.
that-
But so he
Oh,
got
okay.
the gig in Survivor, right? So I'm thinking, well, now we can't keep doing this band. And we had a couple ups and downs, and drummers and bass players were having conflict. So I got hired to do, like, it was supposed to be a rock song, couple rock songs, and it happened to be the singer from Edge of Paradise working with a producer here. So I had all these songs left over. I worked on one song with her, and then I was like, well, I just happen to need a singer, and I have songs. So I'll do this other song. And there was some producer guy, wannabe producer in LA that he hasn't done anything, paid me like really low dough to do the song. And once that was done, I was like, okay, let's go work on these songs and see how this forms into something. And that became Edge of Paradise. And that's where we went now. And we did the first album that Robin did. She re-recorded, redid the vocals. We released it with some subpar label, who of course ripped us off. and that's the
That's called the
beginning,
music
right?
industry, my friend. Yeah.
Right. So, and that's the beginning.
Yeah.
So then we do another album. We sign with a German label. They of course rip us off, right? Okay. Next album, I'm like, no more labels. I'm doing this myself, right?
Yep.
We produce it. We make the album. By now I'm starting to get good at recording my own stuff and getting a feel for producing, because we've worked with, we had Bob Kulick in a few projects. Then we worked with Michael Wagner.
Yeah.
He produced the second album. We went to
All right.
Nashville.
Done
worked
a
in his
couple of
studios.
good things.
He did
Michael
every.
Wagner.
Yeah, I mean, great guy.
He's fucking amazing, dude.
We're learning
Yeah.
tricks. Right. And then we work with Mike Plotnikoff. We work with Howard Benson, pretty much every producer through the way. And so now I'm thinking, the real trick is what we all just talked about, right? Keeping the magic,
Yep.
pulling it out, plugging your veins into the music and trying to spit out something
Yeah.
that has
Yep.
feel and undeniable energy, right? Something people can connect with. So
Authenticity.
you don't really
Authenticity.
need to pay people. Yeah, authenticity, feel, soul, right? Something people can't deny because it's not contrived. It's not something that
Yeah.
you just cookie cutter put together and called it music.
Yep.
So we went ahead and we did an album, which was Universe, which was the first one that we licensed to Frontiers. So I'm thinking, no more record labels. we're going to self-produce it. We're going to pay for the whole thing. We had Mike Plotnikoff produce it. We had Jacob Hansen mix it in Denmark. We paid for the whole nine, right? I go to Frontiers because we had gotten some shows in Japan. So this is our first.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah. We were like, okay, we're starting to get some traction. We hired our own PR guy. We had done a show in the Netherlands, like not shortly before. So that was our first European thing. Then this guy reached out from Japan, put together this little tour. So I hit up Frontiers Music. I say, hey, we have an album. We'd like to recoup some of the money. We'll partner. So we signed a licensing deal, which now turns into this long dragged out thing because Universe was the first album. It's like what we credit the band with as our first album because we did.
Sure.
We did there was 3 albums before that. So those were the learning albums.
Yeah. But you're really
So
saying
what
like
was it?
that's your first real album. That's one you're really claiming.
Yeah.
And so that came after, what was it, Immortal Waltz?
Yeah, Immortal Waltz, that was the one we put out in the German label that ripped us off that Michael Wagner helped us with. That one I kind of, that's before we kind of found our sound. We were kind of fishing around. We worked we did an EP right after Immortal Waltz that we funded ourselves, and we started to go more towards industrial. We called that one Alive, and we had Chuck Johnson produce it. Michael Wagner did a track. Mike Plotnikoff did a track, and then we did the rest ourselves. And it's just a 5-song EP. We licensed that to Universal with the sole goal of getting accurate charting, right? Like accurate sales numbers, accurate radio, whatever it is. Because we weren't getting accurate feedback from the previous labels. We were getting lied to at every turn. Not only were we getting ripped off, they were doing the thing after the fact. They pour salt in your wound. They're like, well, your numbers are horrible, so we don't have any charts, but here's what we think you sold. And you look at it and you're like, wait, 400 albums? It's like we printed out more than that and sold more than that at shows, right? And the barcodes are all on there. So we're like, how are we going to get, somebody to be honest enough to get, because you got to show numbers, right? When you start going from, hey, I'm going to be my own band, now I want to make money, I want to try to make a living, you have to be taking these charts to meetings with people and going, here's what you can expect us to sell, here's what our fan base looks like, here's the engagement, right? Here's what we do, here's what you can expect for ticket sales. And they're going to pull the numbers, right? They're going to pull up Ticketmaster numbers. They're going to pull, it's a whole nother level of stressful bullshit. So once we did that, though, then we turned around. Then we started to get real management, booking agents, and all that, right? So we had John, which our first manager, took us to Europe, and we did the 6 weeks with Sonata Arctica.
Oh, yeah. I remember
right
that.
before COVID. So that was the period, though, we're able to shift. And the worst part about it was getting stuck with Frontiers, which is what we're dealing with now, because the problem with those guys is once they latch onto you, they're going to give you a little bit of money and maybe a little bit of PR, but they're not going to let go of you. And they're going to try to coerce you into keeping with them forever and holding your music hostage, which is what we're dealing with.
Well, I know, man. You told me
That
about
sucks.
it. It's rough.
There's a lot of stories that are not my own that are much worse, but, we signed just a licensing deal. And, at this point, they're trying to keep us quiet and make us conform to signing another 10-year extension. It's like they don't own our music, but they want us to sign stuff saying that they can have our publishing now. And it's like,
they're counting on you to be desperate, that you need them, that you're going to do whatever they want to stay with them. That's what they're counting on.
Yeah, at the same time, they hold you down because we've taken people to them at every aspect. Because we've done a couple cover songs, like we did the Who song. You see, it's on Spotify. So the Who song has myself on guitar, Margarita singing. It's got Neil Sanderson from 3 Days Grace playing drums. It's got it's mixed by Joe, who's the drummer from In Flames. It's on Judge and Jury Records here, which is Howard Benson's label. So we had put together a partnership between those guys where Judge and Jury was going to take the American wing of Frontiers. So now this is a long legal thing that we brokered this. We've brought bands to Frontiers, and they just really are shady in every aspect of the way. Like I've brought bands to them and they've signed those bands, and I've seen the same thing happen to them. And like I've heard from other bands, like obviously we know all the guys in the 80s end up there, you know.
Yeah.
You know, we were playing like Bjorn England, my friend that played with Robin and I. He has a band that Mark Bowles plays in, who was in Yngwie Malmsteen. He's got records on Frontiers, and Mark's a good guy. You know, these guys are, I mean, they're all going there probably because it's one of the last places. And the reason for that is Frontiers is holding that. I mean, they have a choke point right there where they're taking all these artists, right? And you're kind of stuck there. So,
because you feel, also they probably feel like they don't have any other options either.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there isn't a lot of options, to be honest, right? You know, when you get to a certain level, you're either going to sign with somebody who distributes through Sony or they distribute through Warner Brothers, right? And we don't really have other options, so they don't partner with many people, and you're gonna be at a choke point with that. But
yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the other option is start your own label and try and set up your own distribution, and which
probably
is extremely easy.
Yeah, it is easy, and so a lot of management companies are starting to do that now, and it's probably the way the future's going. So maybe that's why a lot of these, you know, labels that I mentioned, maybe they're trying to, you know, stave that off by controlling whatever they can now, try to control the outcome of it. I mean, they're not going to be able to control the outcome forever because people are going away from CDs now even. And
yeah.
I mean,
the bar to get your stuff out there is much lower than it once was. You know what I mean? And the challenge is just the PR. But I've seen some of the advances in the budgets for PR. It's laughable.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's like, okay, that's like what, a week's worth of PR? What are we talking about?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's crazy too. And you can't, like, when you get deals with these people, like our deal with them, they claim certain things, and we have, you know, after you're in the business for a while, you know everybody. You can basically call the same PR guy and be like, hey, bud, you know, I heard you're working the album. What did you do? So, you know, it's laughable that they would give you erroneous charts claiming X, Y, and Z when you can easily verify it. We all have access to digital media now. You can look at Spotify. You can see your numbers. You can see your YouTube. You know, it's not like the new frontier where this is all new stuff. You know, we've all grown up.
It's kind of insulting, man. And at the end of the day, they're just assuming you're too dumb to do that.
Yeah.
Too dumb or too lazy.
Too lazy, probably, right? They probably think that.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So they got hey, they're not going to know, so we'll just do whatever we want to do. You know what I mean? But that being said, on the positive note, I know you said that yours has a new label home coming up. Possibly you're working towards another record with another label.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So we did. Yep. We kind of had a little legal battle. Like when I talked to you last time, we've been going through this back and forth with lawyers, and so they released.
Always fun.
Yeah, it's always fun, right? I mean, fortunately, we have a lawyer who's a fan of the band, and he's been a fan for a long time, and he's a good guy.
For sure.
We can kind of trust him, you know.
You realize that people are going to listen to
as
this,
much
right,
as you can trust the lawyer, right? But you know, so we've been dealing with that, and in the meantime, Frontiers had released 2 singles, so we just went ahead and started writing new music, and we're gonna probably just go forward and release a new album as soon as possible, and we'll have to go backward. So a lot of this stuff, through the growth of the band, it's been funny because I've been making missteps and learning from them, which is, it's the whole thing in life, right? Like you have to keep moving, taking steps and making sure, hey, wait, this is a landmine. Hey, this seems like a good direction.
That's right.
And that's kind of how we developed the band. I mean, we didn't wait for anything, you know, we just started going at it. Like, we're going to release it ourselves. No, we're going to release it with this. We're going to distribute. We're going to, and you really got to feel it out, because you can read every article on the internet, and you know, I guarantee you every one of them is missing key pieces of they're either putting something in that's embellished, or it's not, it's leaving out certain pieces.
Yeah, well, I think you're making a good point that we've talked about on the podcast before. It's important to be a doer.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Well, I mean,
it's
just go do it.
things.
Yeah, don't wait for something to come to you. It's not going to come to you. You know what I mean? Go make it happen. You know what I mean? And I think nowadays there's more tools than ever to make that happen. There's so many avenues that you can do to go put your stuff out, to promote your own stuff. I mean, I've the last 3 albums I've had my own publicist. go out and do all the press for that and stuff. And you just got to go out there and hopefully have someone who knows what they're doing and realize it's a hard slog, man, and don't think it's going to be straight to the top right off the bat. You're going to just take baby steps and just hope to keep doing what you're doing.
Well, you've been doing the same thing, Scott. You had, I mean, you had the guy from Tesla do some stuff for you, right?
Yeah, he did my first record with me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
and that was
like I heard everything you've done, even the instrumental stuff. It's like really professional. Like you're not skimping, you know, which is
yeah. And then see, we had my new stuff. Derek Stringy from Dream Theater is playing keyboards on it.
Cool.
So that's been sick. It's kind of similar to what you were describing with Bissonette and Tony Franklin, man. Because I'll send him a track, and like an hour later, there's like this badass thing. And he's, here you go.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh shit, man! But you just knocked out in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's incredible at the level that's at. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many talented people that you can have access to when you're in it. Once you get in it and you accept the fact that, you know, somebody's going to have to fund it. But that might be me, that might be you, because coming up with the funding is the big bar, right? So that's why everybody looks to a label, and which is probably the biggest first mistake, because the label's not going to solve your problems, right? It's going to create more.
Well, it's going to get yeah. It's like I have a wolf in my house.
It might open up doors, but it might close others.
Yeah, you know, that being said, though, I think that most people see it as some kind of unreachable bar to be able to come up and get your music out to the world, as much as that's definitely not so, you know, to be able to make an impact. Like, I think probably more important than that is having good PR people and booking agents nowadays, because you're not going to make shit off your record. Even if you you're not going to sell any records. You're going to do a lot of streams, and it's not going to add up to anything financially. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I'm thinking in terms of, you know, for our upcoming release, it's just about finding listeners. Finding that audience that's going to love this.
Especially considering the X Ages thing that we're doing is a brand new thing. It's not Scott Allen project. It's not any of the stuff you've done before. It's a totally different thing. And, you know, as long as the music's good, I think the people will be there. You know, it's just a matter of getting it in front of them. You know what I mean? And there's more tools to do that than ever now, which is good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, man,
and I think,
on a personal note. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Good. Oh, no, I was going to take a different direction. I want to hear what you have to say. It sounds like you had a really good, important thing.
Well, I mean, I think probably where you guys are, I think you should probably just get good PR, right? And try to put it out there and push it, see what happens. Because as long as you don't sign something, I mean, the biggest mistake that I could say not to make right now is signing something quick, because that's what we always did. And every time we've signed something, 2 months later, 3 months later, there's a better thing. And we're like, God damn it. Like, but I will say this. If you hadn't signed it, would that better thing arrive? You know, it's like.
That's a good question. You
know, you open a door, and next thing you know, a window's open, and you're like, wait, the window wasn't there before. And so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the way I look at it is, if you put out good stuff, the people are going to find it. You know what I mean? You just got to be persistent and recognize you're going to keep pushing it.
Yep.
And then eventually those opportunities are going to present themselves to you, just because your stuff is undeniable. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I think that's kind of the only challenge really is that there's such a glut of stuff out there. There's so many bands releasing new records, to even if you have a good PR guy, to have something where it's able to push through and get enough people to pay attention.
Yep.
That's probably the hardest part. You know what I mean?
Yeah, attention spans.
We talked on the podcast before.
Yeah, attention spans.
Totally. And I feel like people aren't as into music as they once were, too. I think that's the thing. There's not as many super hardcore, passionate music fans like there was back in, say, the 70s and 80s. You know what I mean? And even the 90s. Really. Sorry, Ron, what were you going to say?
I was going to say attention is the new currency, and that's where all the social media comes in and all of that. But,
They're totally right, yeah.
You know, in terms of music fans, I'll say one thing I really enjoy, Dave, about Edge of Paradise is that listening to the entire albums, man, like they feel like concept albums to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's what's happened over time, because it's become more conceptual. So when we started writing songs, in the same, I'm sure you guys feel that too. When I started writing songs, it was very difficult to get to the end of one song was enough work for me, right? It was tiring. Now it's more like the songs, and collectively it's all like that with the band. The process is really thinking about how that whole album is going to sound together now, and like really trying to make something we're proud of. And like, you know, at this juncture, we're just spending as much as time, spending as much money, spending as much talent. It's like we're all in. And so the whole goal is trying to make an album that would be like one of those timeless records, right? Like you're back
You want
in
to be
black,
the
or
Madman
one of
or
those
something.
things that people just keep playing over and over. And it's like, you know, can that be attained? Hopefully, right? Like that's what you strive for, but trying to find a cohesive sound throughout the album, really paint the picture of what that band is, and make something truly unique and like enjoyable, and keep the vibe, and like, I mean, all of that is part of our process now.
Well, diverse too. You guys have a lot of diversity on your records. It's not like you're a one-dimensional band. You have all kinds of different layers.
Yeah, we're
that you
trying
guys
to.
do, you know.
Right.
Yeah, you know what you need to do is a few more instrumentals, though, man. You need like 2 or 3 more guitar instrumentals.
I agree, dude.
Every album that gets put out.
Yeah.
3 or 4 more solos.
Yes, I think you need an intro solo, a mid solo, and an outro solo in every song.
Oh, minimum.
I agree.
At least.
I totally agree.
Yeah, I think, okay, we've all decided. Everyone knows that's how it's going to be now. It's great.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, though, just on a personal note, man, how do you feel like your playing has changed in the last, 25, 30 years since we were at school together, man? Like, how do you feel like, oh, that sounds terrible. I said 25, 30 years. That can't be right.
It's just a blink of an eye in the scale of the universe, man. It's cool.
Yeah, it's crazy how much time has gone by.
Getting old as hell.
Right, it's crazy how much time has gone by, right? Like, it seems
time's an illusion anyway, guys, right?
Yeah, I think you're right.
But how has your playing changed, do you think? How would you reckon you've grown as a player, and what directions have you grown?
Well, I mean, I remember, we had some teachers, like, after we got out of MI, I went to Pierce here, and I kept studying classical, and I had a couple teachers there, too, that one guy, Ron Benson, I remember him saying, it's important, and I think we heard this in MI, that you have a varied life, and you focus on your life, right? And you try to find things outside of music that interest you, and build a dynamic, a whole life, like a big life, a picture, a dynamic person, right? You're a whole story. So
sure,
I think my playing has become more dynamic because of that, right? Like because of my experience, and because of now I don't practice as much, but when I do, and I get my arm hurts a lot, my hand hurts a lot. When it's time to practice, obviously I have to go right back to 6 hours, 7 hours every day. You got to know when to sit down and put the time in, because you're gonna be asked to do something, and you want to put your best foot forward. But most of the time writing songs, I try not to play. I try not to play solos. I try not to think about anything or listen to a lot, because I want to listen to myself, really, and try to think about what is the song saying? What do I need to pull from myself to make something sound unique and different? And where's the space for that? And where do I hear something? And like, if I listen to too much music and I practice too much, like when we're in MI, we're running scales and we're running arpeggios, and we're trying to figure out new ways to play over 2-5-1, or like, play over a chord substitution and try to be all crafty. That stuff paints you into a corner. So like,
I agree.
Right, it does. The more you build out the chord, right? If you start with a power chord, you can play anything over it. But you put together a 7 sharp 9 flat whatever, and you have all your notes already called out in that chord. Now you don't have any choices whatsoever, right? Yeah. It's better when you start with
what
the
the jazz
slate.
guy's going to start screaming at us right now, Dave, is they're going to start singing shell voicings to us. They're going to start screaming shell voicings. And we're going to go, okay, that's cool and all. No, I know what you mean. I've said this to my students for years. Like, the more simple the harmony, the more wide open it is. And the more complex the harmony, the more things kind of close down. And it's like you can only play these things over the harmony that's more complex. If you're starting with the 9th or 11th chord as your bass, then you've got less things you can do than if it's like a triad or a 5th.
Your options have been already... Yep. You've already, reduced your options to only a few. And then the other thing is, the key piece that's important is finding that really good melody, right? That motif right in the beginning that you can embellish and you can grow upon. And that can get disguised in like, I'm playing this mode, I'm doing this, that, and the other thing. None of that matters unless you have a really good starting point, a few good notes that work together and they sit in a nice pocket and you got a good groove. Now you got something. I try to listen more to grooves. What's that?
If you do that, if you get a great motif happening, then you can go anywhere you want after that, and you have the license to do it by the listener.
Yeah, it's downhill from there.
Idea, then you can do anything.
It almost writes itself.
And do some kind of, and then you come back and just do it again, and you just kind of do it one more time, and then that'll people think it's amazing. I've said this forever about improvisation. You want it to feel like it's composed,
right?
But it's not. You know what I mean? That's the big challenge to do that. And I think that's a level of improvisation that it's challenging to get to for sure.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's funny. It seems to me like maybe I'm wrong on this, but when I knew you back in the day, I feel like all of us were probably like this. We're just sort of like an amalgamation of our influences. You know, like our playing at that time was kind of like a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And I kind of got the feeling that you had a little bit of the Randy, you got a little bit of Jake, you had a little bit of, Yngwie going on and stuff. And it's so funny. And I think that was so cool. I mean, I think that's kind of the way you start as a guitar player. You start with sort of taking their influences and putting them, this is the guys I'm into, and you kind of become an amalgamation of those guys. And then eventually through that, you kind of figure out who you are. You know what I mean?
Correct.
And I think that's really, really. Am I right? I was right.
No, you're totally
Oh my
right,
God!
man.
I can't believe it. I got something right. Yeah. I got some
dude,
insight.
I think we all quote our influences just intrinsically, right?
Right.
Yeah, I was a rebel though,
Right?
man. Because back in the day, I would unapologetically play my Red Beach licks in like '96. I was
Dude,
like,
I'm
"Fuck
glad
you,
you did.
Wingers, awesome. I don't give a shit what you guys say."
Yeah, you should be
Dave
a
can
Black Swan,
attest.
dude.
I was totally doing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I told you this, but I actually had a lesson with Reb about a year and a half ago or something like that. Just because I knew he was doing, I'm like, fuck it, I gotta just talk to this dude and pick his brain on some stuff I've always wanted to know. It was so much fun, man. He's such a good dude, I gotta say. But it was really cool. And I mean, yeah, but I remember, that time we had 4 guys in our friend group. It was me and Dave, and then we had another guy named Chris who's from Minnesota, and we had a guy named George who's from Ohio. Which hopefully you guys are listening to this. I hope you're doing good, guys. But it was really interesting because we were all very different people, and I would say, but we all like had that love of rock and stuff, and that was in common, and that was not easy to come across at MI back in the day. It was really tricky, and it was fun. And I remember, when we jammed together, it was really our personalities kind of came through in our playing. It was actually a trip. That was my first experience with like, wow, these guys really, their playing is who they are.
Right.
It's
That's
so
awesome.
cool. I mean, do you feel like that's true?
Yeah, that's definitely true. And you remember when we used to do those trading licks things, how after we went around the circle a few times, everybody started to imitate one another. You started to become like, you do tapping, then I do tapping, or somebody, it's just weird, right?
Someone throws sweep picking, so we have to start sweep picking and stuff. Yeah, it's so, yeah.
It starts to sound,
and then eventually
you start to meld together. It's weird.
I can't remember.
That's
Did we ever
awesome.
do any Paul Hansen's Applied Rock improv classes?
Yeah, Paul
together
Hansen
back
was
in the
great.
days? I remember it'd be like, I remember we'd be in a room. There's like 40 dudes. Everyone's plugged into amps, and like it used to be go around in a circle and just jam and solo. And I remember that being such a blast because I don't know, it's just something about just laying it out there and just like I remember at that time I was working 40 hours a week too when I was going to school, so I would like work all night. Get up in the early morning, come to school, and I'd be like, okay, I haven't played at all. Now I got to go solo in front of 40 people. It was awesome though. It was fun.
Baptized by fire, man.
But that's the thing too, that I mean, I noticed that about you from the beginning. Like, I mean, I grew up kind of in a blue collar upbringing, right? And so when I came to MI, I was pretty much like, this is it for me. I'm going forward and I'm not going backward. I'm not going back where I came from.
You're walking through a one-way door. That's the way.
Like I'm all in.
Yeah.
And like, so I noticed that about you too. You were pretty much there, and this is where you're going with your life, and you're still doing it, man. And that's respectful, dude. Yeah. That's the real musician.
You too, man. Yeah.
Right. That's the guy who lives for the craft, and like, that's why I went to MI in the first place. I wanted to be surrounded by people, for the most part, who had that same passion, right? Because keeping that fire, keeping that passion alive is the hardest thing, man. And if you get away from people that share that, you just get kind of bogged down. And even if you're in music and you're around people who are just like, it's about making money, or it's about, you got to have your socials and you got to work on your numbers. And it's like, no, the real thing is the playing, man. And like writing the music, breathing the music and being a part of that music is really what the joy is,
That's very well said, Dave. I have to say, man.
Yeah, sometimes I take for granted, how many great friends I have, like Scott, who are awesome musicians too. And it's cool. Sometimes I take that for granted. Having also worked in, music retail.
I mean,
for a long
Ryan's been
time,
playing in bands forever,
teaching and the whole nine yards.
I think we're
cool
still in the trenches a little bit. I think you stopped teaching a while back, right? You do like some stuff here and there.
Yeah, I had to stop teaching, man.
I mean, we're still in it, man.
Like
still like 60 students a week.
I teach a few people, but and I can remember talking to you one time, and I think you told me, you're like, man, these guys, like, they just don't get it. They don't want to play all 5 patterns of the scale. And I was thinking, like, holy shit, he's gonna burn out, man. And you never burned out, right? So,
well,
did you come
eventually
to
sort of realize, okay, You figure
Yeah,
out what
that's
you're
what I was
going to
gonna
try
ask.
and get out of it. Yeah,
Right.
you just kind of figure out what you're going to get out of it. Because, like, it was unconceivable when I first started teaching, and you knew me back then. Like, it was inconceivable to me that you couldn't want to be the greatest guitar player who's ever lived.
Right.
Like, why would
Right.
you even pick up the guitar if you don't want to be the greatest guitar player who ever lived? So I'd have some kid come in to me, when this is like right after I got out of school. And I remember, like, like, okay, so we're going to learn all the modes, and we're going to learn these 4-octave sweep arpeggios. And the kid's like, I just want to play Green Day's Good Riddance. I'm like, no, we're going to play harmonic minor in every mode.
Yep.
It's like,
Yeah, it's that kid at the party, right? Who, the person he's got a crush on walks down the hallway, hears him playing Green Day, and it's mission accomplished,
Yep.
right?
I couldn't conceive
That's
of that.
tough.
Dave, it took me like 3 years to get my head around that.
That was probably a
be the
tough
greatest
3
guitar-
years, man. Because that was the only thing. Like right away, I kind of understood when I started teaching. Like, not everybody wants the same thing from this, right? Some people you're babysitting. Some people, and it changes. Like your influence on them, like. The coolest thing is when you're teaching somebody who just got dropped off because he's, a dim-witted kid and his mom doesn't want him out getting in trouble, and you're the babysitter. And, 4 or 5 years later, now he's super hardcore guitar player, right? He's got his own band. And, I had that experience a bunch of times, and that was the coolest thing about teaching. But the amount of energy that you put into that, I mean, that just burned me out. I mean, I was doing the 65, 60, 60 to 70 students every week for like years. And man, and probably, not as long as you're going because you're still going. But after
I'm still doing it. Yeah.
Dude, 15 years was
I'm
like.
doing that and recording and doing sessions and recording stuff. I mean, that's actually way back off on doing the session work stuff because it was so intense and I wasn't making enough money to justify the time that it was taking me. I mean, you can imagine you go taught 14 students that day, you come home, you got 4 hours in the studio that night doing sessions.
Yeah.
That by the time you're done, you've done like a freaking 15-hour day.
Yep.
And you're like, okay, and the money that's going from that is not going to justify. And it's just some release that's going to happen that, I hope the artists are successful with it and stuff, but it's one of those things that I can't, it's not really feeding my soul. It's not what I want to do. I'm not doing my music. You know what I mean? And it can be pretty tough, man. I mean, it can definitely wear you down, but I think, you find a way to kind of get as much out of it as you can positively. Like, okay, I'm impacting these kids' lives or these people's lives. And I've got a bunch of students who've gone to Berkeley and MI and gotten master's degrees in classical guitar and stuff and taught. By the way, the one student I always think of when he got the degree, I always tell him how disappointed I am in him. Like, dude, classical guitar, where's the Floyd Rose, man? Play that shit into a Marshall. What kind of bullshit is this? You know what I mean? Come on, if you're going to play Paganini, do it like Yngwie. That's how you do it right. You know what I mean? I'm sorry, I digress. All right, so, we probably have taken up so much of Dave's time. We're going to get you going here, man. I appreciate you so much dropping by. Hopefully we can do this again if you have fun doing this.
For sure.
What I mean?
Yeah, dude, thank you.
Yeah, it was good talking
Any
with you guys.
thoughts, Ryan?
So, hey, another thing is like, because I know you guys got the vocal band and everything. So, if you're gonna start looking for PR people, I can definitely refer you to some people that will probably be more expensive than you want to spend, but they won't waste your time. I mean, it's always expensive.
Hey, man, the last
Absolutely,
PR guy
love
I
that.
had was Michael Schenker's PR guy, and he did Ace Frehley, man. So, hey.
Yeah.
That guy was, and I don't.
Totally interested. Thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome, Dave. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll
very
definitely
much.
send you some
definitely.
people. And like, obviously, if you wanted into Frontiers, I could definitely give you an in, but you'll be stuck there. And like,
You just spent a whole 20 minutes explaining why I don't want to do that.
like, probably avoid.
This tastes like shit. Try it.
But I've told other
This girl's
people
got
that and they've
massive
signed
herpes,
it
but
anyway.
if you want to. Thank you for listening to the Rock Guitar Confidential Podcast with Ryan and Scott, and today with Dave Bates from Edge of Paradise. Please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Now back to the show.
So, Dave, the albums sound great, man. Can you tell us a little bit about the gear you're using?
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. Lately, I've been using an ESP 7-string that I got. Just started working with ESP guitars, and it's got active electronics in there. Fishmans, that's what they are.
Oh, you're using the Fishmans. Awesome.
I was trying to think. I'm thinking Fisherman. Nah, that ain't right.
I think
the John
what
the
you're saying is
Fishermans.
the fisherman built the guitar for you, and then they handed it over to SP. That's what happened.
Yes.
So.
Doesn't Buckethead use the John the Fisherman pickups?
Awesome. What made you start playing 7? What kind of was the inspiration there? Like, as long as I've known you, you've been mostly a 6-string guy.
Yeah, it was kind of a thing that came after after MI, you know, the Korn thing was happening at the time, and
That's a sad thing. That's true.
right. And most of the bands I was getting in after getting out of school, everybody was trying to emulate the Korn thing. And so for me, I thought, well, this is cool that you can extend the range. Obviously, it's hard on your hand because you got to, you know, reconfigure how you reach for the notes, and it's just a whole different animal, you know. So I got a couple of Schecters back then, and, you know, started messing around with it and trying to get a feel for it. And it just became a thing after that because I spent so much time doing the 7-string thing. Now it feels weird to go back. Like the 6-string is,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
yeah, it's totally different. You know, it's like the neck is so wide and there's so much more real estate that it's kind of funky to go back.
I've actually been using 7 strings myself for about 20 years too. I mean, kind of the same thing, but I justified it because like Dream Theater and Steve Vai and Nevermore all use 7 strings, which is kind of like I couldn't own anything to do with Korn or Limp Bizkit. I wasn't going to have any kind of responsibility for that. But you're right. I think the key is with the 7 for anybody listening to this is you got to go back and forth. You got to play the 7 and the 6, kind of constantly switch back and forth. And your hand can do both. If you just do 7s for like 6 months and then you come back to 6, Dave's totally right. It feels weird.
Yep.
But if you go back and forth all the time, it's easy. You know what I mean? And dude, I've heard your guitar. It sounds awesome, man. Actually, when I saw you guys the other day, it was killer, man. Really, really good. ESP makes great stuff, man.
Yeah, the ESP guitar that they sent me is neck through. I think it's a M1007. I think they call it.
Okay, so it's like a Strat body shape, like a Mirage Series M1000.
Yeah,
nice.
Definitely, yeah, like a Mirage, but it's got the neck through and it's got the Fishmans and 7th string and sounds great right out of the box. And you know, I was using the Wizard head that I started working with Wizard amps.
Nice.
The Wizard metal head was what I use live now. You know,
that's an all tube, right? Is that like a
it's
Marshall-y kind of thing?
Big and bulky, but it's basically a souped up over the top Marshall, you know. It's got tons of gain.
Rad.
That's awesome, dude. Are you an EO34 guy or are you a 606 guy? Where do you kind of come from on that one?
I mean, I don't really have a preference. I think it depends on the amp. You know, like we were talking about the Cali, that amp there, and I just picked up the Cali, and I think that's got EL34s in it. And I mean, it sounds amazing, right? Like whatever they did to that amp, that thing is it's like a brick of gold, man. Sweet tone comes out of there.
Hell yeah, that's awesome.
I try not to mess with stuff, you know, like if I do, there's a guy here at the studio we record at. Mike Plotnikoff has a studio here, and guy Mark, that's Richie Sambora's guitar tech. He fixes amps. Yeah, he fixes the studio amps. He fixes guitars, and I default to whoever's the expert. You know what I mean? Like
that's smart.
Yeah.
It's not my wheelhouse, right? I mean, I got enough shit to do.
Dude, I know just enough to be dangerous, so it's one of those things where I'm like, no. I think we need KT88s in there. Let's swap them out. We don't need to rebias it. What are you talking about? You know? No, it's funny. Actually, I've been using 6L6s forever. In the 65, I use PV amps, so in my 3120s and my 6505s, it's all 6L6s. But I recently got the 6534 with the EL34s. And I totally dig that so much, man. There's a mid-range to EL34s that's just more barky and more punchy that I feel like 6L6s are really smooth sounding.
Yep.
But I think the 34's got like a punch in your gut kind of thing. I think it's really cool. You know what I mean? So I'm going to guess your Wizard's probably a 34 if it's a Marshall-y kind of thing. You know what I mean?
I think, but because Wizard has everything made custom for them, I mean, I'd have to pop it open and look in there. Like all the transformers and all the tubes are made specifically for Wizard, so they just say Wizard on everything, and
that's cool.
And they sound great. So everything he does, it's just like really clean and clear, you know.
I remember checking those out at the NAMM show, a few different NAMM shows, and being really impressed with them. They're really, really cool. And the ESP stuff is always great. I mean, I can't tell you. Actually, he's got one on the wall right over here. They're just killer, man. Cool. I've always been a fan, you know. I mean, obviously, Michael Wilton and Chris DeGarmo, George Lynch, you know, Jeff Hanneman, you know, all the legends using them. So
yeah, absolutely.
Crazy. Right on, dude.
Yeah, they got everybody on the roster now.
That's right. Well, you know, early on they were really aggressive about, you know, getting endorsements out and in the rock community. Good stuff.
Yeah, it's
killer stuff.
Man, how do you like the neck through? By the way, that's kind of a thing I've always been kind of, you know, hot and cold on. Do you like the neck through? Does it feel great? Does it feel strange coming from a bolt-on to a neck through?
Well, I like it. I mean, for this guitar, I mean, I didn't have that much time with the guitar before we started playing some shows again, so it felt really natural to me. Like, it's nice to have the access when you're standing up because obviously the neck's a little bit wider. So being able to manipulate my thumb around the back and without hitting that block is kind of cool.
That is
but yeah,
so nice.
I mean, it definitely plays smooth, The bolt-ons, I mean, you can't get the action quite as low towards the bottom, I don't think. At least in my experience, and I don't take very good care of my guitars. I think you probably take
their tools, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
actually,
so they get beat up.
Yeah, it's true. I mean,
a guitar that doesn't have dings and dents in it is a guitar that doesn't get played.
You're absolutely right. It's a tool. It's supposed to be used.
That's
it's
right.
not some precious thing you're supposed to take care of with white gloves and stuff
right.
when you walk around and stuff.
Yeah.
You should actually earn those dents too. Like the people with the relic guitar.
Right,
that's the
relic
dumbest.
guitars.
Right.
It is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of.
Yeah, that's foolish,
absolutely.
right?
You guys, I want a guitar that looks like it's been on the road for 40 years, but it's a brand new guitar. It's so dumb. It's Fred the dentist has a relic Stratocaster.
Right.
Where did that get relic there, Fred?
I tell all my students, especially the teenage ones, when they get a ding or a dent in their guitar, dude, just tell everybody you were playing in front of 20,000 people at the Budokan in Japan. Someone threw a beer bottle on stage. Happens all the time.
Classic story.
Yeah, just
Classic
own
story.
that ding or dent.
That's so funny. Well, Dave, that's awesome, dude. I'm so happy you got the great gear going on. I mean, in my mind's eye, I always think of Dave Bates playing an old Jackson Dinky, but I guess things change.
Yeah.
Move on.
Yeah, I still have that guitar, man. I still got that one. Yeah.
That was an awesome guitar, man. I remember jamming on that thing.
Jackson Dinky right there.
Also
in the studio, yeah.
You know, it's funny when you said the action, because all my VGAs are all bolt-on guitars, but because there's a carbon fiber in the neck, they're just completely straight. They will never, ever change. So I actually have
nice.
an it's identical from 1st fret to 24th fret.
That's awesome.
But the one thing I would change about it if I could, and I know I'll never get a chance to, would be the heel. The bolt-on heel, you're totally right, man. If you're standing up and you're trying to get up high, the bolt-on just is it's such a challenge. Even if it's got a great heel on it, it's the neck through is so much more effortless to play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is,
and that allows you to put the guitar lower too, because otherwise you got to jack it way up and it looks foolish, right?
Wait a minute.
I mean, it's a trade-off.
You suggesting the way it looks matters? Come on, man. I can't believe
Yeah,
I'm hearing here.
So now, since we're talking about neck throughs, so Dave, what's your take? Satin on the neck or gloss?
Satin probably is preferred. I mean, I remember back in MI, I was sanding off the finish and we were steel wooling them, and you know, that felt really good. And I remember one time right after graduating, because I had the oil finish on the Charvel.
Yeah.
And I played at the Santa Monica Pier. And I remember thinking how cool this is, man. This place is jammed with young people and families, and they're going to get exposed to some heavy music. And the moisture from the ocean, it made the neck sweat like crazy, man.
Yeah.
I couldn't even barely move my hand across the thing. I had to keep wiping it off. I mean, it was ridiculous. And
I bet your sanding was really whacked out, too. I bet
I mean, that would be one instance where having lacquer would probably be a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, every luthier I've ever talked to has said that you don't want to have it unfinished. You want to have some kind of finish on that. I'm like, I like the way it feels unfinished, so it feels nice when it's just wood, But they always tell you don't do that, man. It's true. Yeah.
Yep.
That's crazy. Well, that's pretty rad, dude. I love it. So, any other gear stuff you need to talk about? Any other pedals, cables, pickups, anything like that?
Well, that's pretty much it. I'm using the Wizard. Using the Wizard setup with the two vintage 30s and the EVs and the X pattern, and then Wizard metalhead and ESP 7-string and active electronics, and I still use the G-Force, but.
So tell us some more about. Well, you mentioned the speakers, right? So tell us about your cabs.
Yeah, the cabs are Wizard cabs. They have vintage 30s and EV 75s and an X pattern. And that's something that he swears by that. I don't know. He sent them over and he was super excited. Of course, I was lifting them at the time, and they're like 103 pounds per cab. So.
EV speakers are no joke, man.
They're heavy. Yeah. I mean, and the cabs sound amazing. They're just super, they're like a brick shit house, they're like just a wall of sound, and they can take punishment.
So are you using straights, slants, or both?
Both of these cabs are straight cabs, and I just think that was just a thing, and they don't have wheels. They're just wood to the floor.
Yep.
So,
which is even more fun with the EV speakers in it. Like, it's so cool that there's no casters on those. Isn't it great?
Probably gathers more bass. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can feel it in the floor.
That's
loud
true.
enough.
Yeah, it makes your pant legs flat.
Nice, dude. So
Yep.
when you're playing live, do they put one mic on like one of the other speakers? They mic up the EV and the Vintage 30, or how do you usually do it?
Well, so live I'm using either the aux box if it's convenient,
okay, yeah.
or the Shure box. You know, what is that?
Resistant load.
Because Shure makes guitars, but they also make that IR loader.
Yeah.
So
Oh, cool.
everything comes out of the head into the IR box, and then that goes to the PA system.
Oh, I mean, that just makes it so much simpler, man. That's so smart.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically,
Kudos to
because
for still- Go ahead. I'm sorry.
but it's like using the Kemper, right? Like you want to use the IRs for the convenience, but miking stuff is just messy, especially now because nobody has time to set up, and PA systems are dwindling in venues. It's like nobody's taking advantage. Like everybody's using in-ears now, so there's not much monitor systems. They're kind of, sometimes you have floor monitors, sometimes you don't. Sometimes they're just there for visual props, especially when we did the European tour. Nobody in Europe is using stage monitors anymore.
Yeah, and if you walk in with a big loud amp with a 412, they're gonna say, "Dude, we don't need any of that stage volume." So
yeah, it's weird, right? It's like, and they're way ahead of us on touring over there, man. They have a consistent system of touring bands that make a living doing that, and they have, a pretty good system of venues over there. And most of the venues in each circuit, there's just the house system is just the front end, no floor monitors. You have your own guy for the stage sound, and the stage is really quiet. It's really bizarre. You just hear drums
and yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
That is weird.
yeah, it's like Twilight Zone thing. But I would rather have the cabs, obviously, because that's what you grow up with, and having the feel of the cabs behind you. But
there's something about a 57 too on front of the grill. You know what I mean? There's a sound that you're kind of tuned to. Your ear knows what that sounds like. You know what I mean?
Yep.
IR is as good as they are. Even if you have it set to 57 on a Vintage 30, like directly down on the speaker, it doesn't sound the same.
Yep.
Does it? There's something that gets lost in that. It's weird.
But the IR, Scott, they're getting so good now. It's like, I prefer the aux box now, because the sound of the box is like, it's a whole nother element to the tone, and I can run that Wizard Head mono into the aux and send it out stereo. So you can have, it's nuts, and you can, the tone in the box, like the emulations of the cabinets and the mics, they're really thick. It really adds a whole nother dimension to the tone, and the aux box has reverbs and delays and all kinds of stuff you can program in there. Obviously, you got to get on your laptop or your phone and fucking access the thing, but
yeah, I go to the app. Yeah,
it's kind of, the technology thing is daunting now, but once you get in there and you get a few settings, it's really cool. It's a cool box, and I switched to the Sur one just because it was half size and it was a lot smaller, and it's a little quicker to set up, but not quite as big sounding.
It's kind of a DI with IRs, right? That's basically what that is.
Yeah. You can load your own IRs. You get like, I think 16 or 24 that you can pop in there. Yeah, and then I just got
is that you have so many more options though with that. It's like you had whoever was micing with whatever 57 was at the club or whatever. That's what you had before. Now you've got like 15 options walking in the door.
Right.
You know what I mean? Maybe speakers you don't actually own, maybe mics you don't actually own. You know what I mean? You can kind of figure out this. You're totally right. It's way more convenient and better. It's just there's a part of me that just like wants it to be like it was.
Yeah. So ideally, then you should use both. That's what I'm thinking, because I like the mic in front of the cabinet. Why not have both, right? Like we have technology
layer it in,
and then have the monitors just be like the mic, and then the people up front are hearing the IRs and stuff like that. That makes sense, because the sound man doesn't want to deal with that shit. So it's pretty funny. I remember rolling in for years with the two 412s and made them mic both cabinets, and then had a dry and wet cab, and they had to blend it at the board and stuff, and that now looked like I was such a pain in the ass. I don't know why I did that. It's weird.
Because you could. We all could.
I guess that's what it was.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But now, like you're saying, though, it's funny. Part of me thinks it's more complicated, but if you actually stop and think about it for a second, using an aux box or the Sur, it's like so much easier. I mean, my God, that's true. You know what I mean? So, awesome, dude.
It's both more complicated and easier, because it's more complicated for the guitar player because you got to do more homework. You got to get everything, you almost have to have a schematic, right, to set your shit up now. You got cables running back and forth everywhere, and it's just easier for the sound man because the venues are not, it's a cattle call, right? You're basically given 10, 15 minutes to get everything together and go. And,
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
you
if
just
you're
do
lucky,
it.
you get some levels if you're lucky, and then
Yep.
or just walk up on stage with nothing, just a flat board, and they figure it out as you're playing halfway through your first song. They'll get in the board
Yeah.
and stuff. You know, it's yeah. I've been there a million times, man. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, I mean, I think simple's better. Definitely, you know what I mean. If you can kind of get to the point where you can have more control on the stage too. I think what's cool is you're doing kind of a mix of both ways. You have the amp head that's going into an aux. So you're kind of having an all tube version of what a Kemper would be. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like still has a bit of that kind of classic, tube amp, tube saturation, going into the IRRs. I respect that. It actually is still fairly old school, actually, which is pretty.
Yeah, I prefer that because I have the Kemper and I used the Kemper for a couple years, and going over, like when you go to Europe, you're limited to weight, and what you can bring.
Sure.
So the Kemper fits in the plane right under the seat, no problem, but it doesn't have that same kind of push that a tube amp has. You don't get that mid-range cut,
Yeah.
And I mean, it sounds great. Like at home when you're jamming on it, you can't really tell. It's as good as anything else out there. But yeah, when you put it in a mix, it's a whole different story, man.
Yeah.
You start missing.
Bedroom tone is not stage tone.
Right.
Yeah, and studio tone either.
Studio
If you start
tone,
getting
that's
into that, it's a completely different animal.
Yeah,
That doesn't mean
whole
you can't
different
get
ballgame.
awesome sounds. I mean, Kempers I've heard awesome recordings done on Kempers,
Right.
Nax effects and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just feeling stubborn, I guess. I'm feeling old and stubborn. Damn it! It's supposed to be tube amps and microphones and cabinets.
I've got my 2 half stacks on call.
Yep, there you go.
So, when the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, when we were recording the first demos for the X Aegis record, we actually were recording live amps at first, and then we switched to neural DSPs because we realized it's so much easier to dial up a new tone like that. And the Kemper is the same thing, like you're describing too. It's crazy, man. So awesome.
Cool.
Okay, so thank you so much for listening to the Rock Guitar Confidential podcast with Ryan and Scott. Please make sure to check out our socials at, our website is www.xaegisband.com.
That's www.exaegisband.com.
Keep that spelling in mind because the next things I'm going to mention are our socials. So you can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/xaegisband. You can find us on Twitter at, guess what? Twitter.com/xaegisband. You can also follow us on Instagram at instagram.com/xaegisband. We'll keep up on not only what's going on with the podcast, but anything that's going on with our band in terms of releases, shows, and all that stuff. You can get all the lowdown right there. What do you think, Ryan?
Again, that's EXAEGISBAND.com.
Yeah. Thank you guys for listening.
Peace.